that I did 2 years ago at the Waters Institute in San Francisco. And it's part of a trilogy of exhibitions that I've curated and I'm still curating around iconic American novels. I just threw that particular exhibition in there as sort of like example of maybe for you to see sort of like how maybe some of the ideas that you saw in the other projects sort of like develop further. And here it was really my interest to understand part of the history of the United States through the lens of literature, through the lens of three very iconic books, which is The Wizard of Oz, Moby Dick, and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is actually the show that I'm working on right now for the Waters that's going to open in late September of this year. So all of the shows were sort of like a combination of existing artworks that related to some of the themes and ideas that these books presented, and new commissions where I invited artists that I felt had an affinity to the subjects of the books, where they would create new works specifically for the exhibition. And it was about probably 60%, 70% new commissions and 30 to 40% newly created work. And in addition, all of those shows are also featuring heavily what I would call like non-art material. It would be historical artifacts that somehow relate to the history of those books in one way or the other, like the first editions, manuscript papers, letters. For example, here with The Wizard of Oz, you would see the first edition, and next to the first edition you would have the original review of the New York Times that was written in 1900 about the book. It was actually a very favorable review at that time. These are the original, or some of the original drawings that the illustrations are based on. They're done by W.W. Denslow, and they're part of the collection of the New York Public Library. And of like the 42 illustrations that were in the book, only these 4 actually still exist as originals. The other ones got lost or destroyed. Just sort of give you a few impressions here. Oh yeah, they're the ruby slippers that Judy Garland wore in the movie. So this whole section there, this yellow part of the wall, was all about the 1939 film. And each, in the book itself, Denslow, the illustrator, had different colors for the different parts of the books, and I used those colors as sort of like guides through the exhibition, following the sequence they were coming up in the book. So it started with gray, then you had blue, then you had green, then you had yellow, then you had purple, and then you had red. And for each of those colored sections of the wall, I had different types of artifacts. As I said, the illustrations, the first film made or based on The Wizard of Oz ever made, which was actually done by the author, Frank L. Baum himself, in 1910, with the help of his children that were dressing up in sort of like fantasy costumes in the living room of the house of Baum, and it was filmed. It's a silent movie, which maybe lasts about 12 minutes. And it's not really only about the first Wizard of Oz book, but combines elements of all the 15 Wizard of Oz books that Baum wrote. And just to give you an idea of an existing piece and how that actually could have been included here, the piece with the ribbons coming out of the wall is a piece by a Brazilian artist called Rivani Neuenschwander, and it was a piece that already existed. And this is about these little ribbons that people put around their wrist, and when you put them around, you make a wish, and then apparently when these little ribbons fall off your wrist, there's wishes coming through. And of course, as you know, the story of The Wizard of Oz is all about these wishes of Dorothy's wish to go home, and the Tin Man wanting to have a heart, and the lion to have courage, and the scarecrow wanting to have a brain. So it was very much like this relationship about desires and wishes, and that sort of came out here. And each ribbon had a wish printed on them. So you could select out of like these 1,000 wishes a wish that would sort of like fit your needs or your desires, and could wrap it around. And then at the same time, you were asked to write another wish on a piece of paper that we provided and stick it into the hole where you just put the ribbons out. And then we would take those wishes and produce new ribbons that would then be included in the holes that were freed up by the ones that were taken out. What you see here on the ground, can you actually see this here? These like pieces of paper. A French artist, Loris Griot, bought hundreds of old paperback copies of The Wizard of Oz and had them turned into confetti. And then at the opening, we created, through the help of a machine, almost like a cyclone of confetti in the entrance hall. So when you arrived for the opening, the confetti was swirling around, made out of the old copies of the Wizard of Oz. And what I felt was like a nice situation there was that, you know, turning these books into confetti was sort of a violent act. You sort of like really take this book and the story and all its beauty apart, but you kind of create something that's in a way also related to something that's very uplifting and happy and about celebration, you know, pieces of confetti. And then finding that form of the cyclone that would take you as the visitors and bring you inside to the galleries, just like the way Dorothy was taking to the land of Oz through the cyclone that picks her up in Kansas. So pretty much all of those shows, whether that's Wizard of Oz or Moby Dick or Huckleberry Finn, are about journeys, are about, you know, this idea of going from one place to the other. And I think that's very much how, like, I see an exhibition as a sort of metaphor, you know, like a place where you discover something about the world, about art, but, you know, eventually, hopefully, you discover also maybe something about yourself in this relationship to the artworks, in the relationship to the other viewers, in the conversations that you have about the artworks and the exhibitions. I mean, there was tons more of confetti. This is just like a little bit of confetti that was left after the opening that we put into the gallery. This is like the first Oz film that we had projected there. This is another projection inside the galleries by a San Francisco artist called Bruce Conner. He died, unfortunately, about 3 weeks before the opening of the show. He was quite old, in his mid-70s, but Bruce Conner has been really a big artistic force in San Francisco and been celebrated as an experimental avant-garde filmmaker. He began working with film in the 1950s and almost is sort of considered the forefather of the video, the music video, the way that he would use found materials, a particular form of editing that then he would juxtapose with certain types of music. Extremely extraordinary artist, in my opinion, also kind of overlooked and a bit underrepresented. One of the themes that I was particularly interested in was like this conflict of Dorothy, this idea of that she wanted to go to the other side of the rainbow, wanted to leave Kansas, and then once she was actually at this other place, she wanted to go back to Kansas. And I think that's sort of like a feeling that we all probably can relate to, you know, where we want to leave the place that we're very familiar with, but once we leave, we also know, or we begin to appreciate what it means to have a home, a place that you can call home, where you come from, where you know what's going on and where your roots are. And I feel, especially in this era of globalization, this place called home can also be like a place that you adopt. You know, you move from one place to the other, and then you just set your roots down in a particular place. So here, I represented this idea through two works, and one of them is this set of paintings here by Robert Bechtel, who is an artist who has lived all his life in the Bay Area in San Francisco and has never painted anything else as these sort of photorealistic paintings of street scenes in San Francisco. And in this case, I made a particular selection. I selected the painting that he made of the house he was born in, and a painting of the house that he lives in now. And there's about probably 50 years in between these two paintings, and the style hasn't changed at all. So now he's in his late 70s, maybe even already in his early 80s, and began since a couple of years only to paint these kind of works that are sort of like in the twilight. Kind of probably thinking about him moving on to another place, somewhere, and thinking about death and kind of incorporating this. So I kind of like decided to include the house where he was born and the place where he's living now into the exhibition to really represent this idea of a place called home, where things are very steady, things don't really change. You're kind of familiar with this, and it's kind of astonishing to find this artist whose style of painting hasn't really changed over all of those decades. And this is the